Mia had always known that marrying into the Blackwood family wasn't going to be easy. Her husband, Richard, was the golden boy, Mama's pride and joy, a man who could do no wrong in the eyes of his overbearing mother, Eleanor Blackwood. But Mia was no fool. She saw through the facade of their perfect family and the way Eleanor still held her son in an iron grip, dictating his every move, including how he treated his own wife. For the first few years of their marriage, Mia tried. She endured Eleanor's cold glances, the snide remarks about her cooking, the passive-aggressive jabs about how she would never be good enough for Richard. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened on that fateful evening, the night her world shattered. Richard had insisted on hosting their wedding anniversary party at their grand suburban home, a house Mia had made a home, despite Eleanor's constant interference. She worked tirelessly to prepare for the evening, ensuring everything was perfect, hoping against all odds that maybe, just maybe, this time, Eleanor would acknowledge her efforts. She was wrong. As guests arrived, Eleanor swooped in like the queen she believed herself to be, stealing the attention and turning the celebration into a showcase of her own dominance. She flaunted her wealth, dropping passive-aggressive comments about how Mia was lucky Richard had married beneath him. Richard, spineless as ever, laughed along, drinking more than he should have and soaking in the praise of his mother like an obedient little boy. But the real blow came later in the evening. Mia had excused herself to retrieve a bottle of wine from the kitchen, but as she approached the dining room again, she heard hushed voices, Richard and Eleanor. "She's so desperate, isn't she?" Eleanor sneered, running around, trying to prove she belongs here. "Pathetic." Richard chuckled. "Let her try. I mean, what else is she good for? She's not exactly trophy wife material, but she does what she's told." Mia's breath caught in her throat. Her hands clenched around the bottle of wine, nails digging into the glass. She waited for Richard to defend her, to tell his mother to stop. But he didn't. Instead, Eleanor continued, "You should have listened to me and married Claire. That girl had class. Unlike this one. Honestly, you should count yourself lucky you haven't had kids with her. Imagine being stuck with her forever." Richard snorted. "Don't remind me. I've thought about leaving more than once. Trust me. But she's convenient, and I know she won't do anything stupid like leave me. She's got nowhere to go." The wine bottle slipped from Mia's grip, shattering on the marble floor. Silence. Then footsteps. Richard and Eleanor turned to see her standing there, her face unreadable. "Mia," Richard started, but she held up a hand. "Don't," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I've heard enough." She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't lash out. She simply turned and walked away, heading straight to their bedroom, where she locked the door. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, the truth sinking in. She had been nothing more than a placeholder in Richard's life, a convenient fixture. And Eleanor? She had never wanted her here to begin with. But if they thought she was weak, that she had nowhere to go, that she would just sit there and take it, they were dead wrong. A slow smile curled on her lips. They had underestimated her. And now they were going to pay. Mia didn't leave that night. She didn't scream, throw things, or demand answers. No, she played it smart. She spent the next few days acting normal, giving Richard no reason to suspect anything had changed. She kissed him goodbye when he left for work, cooked his favorite meals, and even tolerated Eleanor's presence with a forced smile. But behind that facade, she was planning. Her first move was securing her finances. Mia had always been careful with money, despite Richard's belief that she was naive. She had her own savings, a small but well-hidden fund that Richard had no knowledge of. But that wouldn't be enough. If she was going to ruin him, she needed more. So she got creative. Richard had always been careless with his passwords. It took her less than an hour to access his personal accounts, his emails, his finances. And what she found made her blood boil. Not only did he have a secret investment account worth nearly $250,000, but he was also funneling money to another woman, Claire. Oh, the irony. Claire, the woman Eleanor had wanted him to marry. The woman Richard had clearly never let go of. Mia didn't cry. She didn't waste time on emotions. Instead, she documented everything. Every transaction, every email, every single piece of evidence she would need when the time came to strike. Then, she turned her attention to Eleanor. Eleanor prided herself on her perfect reputation in the local social scene. She ran charity events, hosted luncheons, and ensured that everyone in town knew she was a woman of influence. But Mia knew the truth. She knew about the shady land deals, the backdoor negotiations, and the way Eleanor manipulated people to maintain her status. So Mia started making phone calls. By the end of the week, she had planted enough seeds to watch Eleanor's world start to crumble. Rumors began circulating. Business partners started pulling away. Invitations to exclusive events were suddenly rescinded. And Richard? He remained blissfully unaware, still believing his wife was nothing more than a docile, obedient woman who would never dare challenge him. Oh, how wrong he was. Mia wasn't just planning revenge. She was orchestrating his downfall. Mia had set the pieces in motion. Now it was time to start toppling the dominoes. She knew Richard's weakness, his arrogance. He believed himself untouchable, convinced that Mia would never dare fight back. That assumption was his fatal flaw. One morning, as Richard left for work, she planted the first dagger. A neatly printed envelope sat on the seat of his car, waiting for him like a ticking time bomb. Inside were copies of his financial transfers to Claire, every single deposit, every shady transaction. There was no note, no accusation. Just cold, hard evidence. She knew he would panic the moment he saw it. And panic leads to mistakes. Sure enough, by noon, he called her. "Mia, what the hell is this?" His voice was sharp, demanding. She smiled, but her voice remained calm. "Oh, you mean the evidence of your little side project? I just thought you'd appreciate seeing how well documented it is." He hesitated.
"Mia, listen." "No, Richard."
"You listen," she interrupted. "I know everything. And don't think for a second that you can weasel your way out of this. You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. The second was thinking I wouldn't do anything about it." Silence. A beat of uncertainty. Then came the rage. "You wouldn't dare try to ruin me." She chuckled. "Oh, honey, I already have." Hanging up, she exhaled deeply. It had begun. Meanwhile, Eleanor was facing her own reckoning. The carefully placed rumors Mia had spread were growing like wildfire. Mia had sent anonymous tips to local reporters, exposing Eleanor's involvement in fraudulent real estate deals. Her reputation, built over decades, was beginning to crumble. Calls from board members went unanswered. Friends stopped returning messages. Invitations dried up. Eleanor, once untouchable, was now drowning in scandal. And Mia? She was just getting started. By the end of the day, Richard returned home in a storm of fury. He slammed the front door, eyes blazing. "You think you can destroy me?" Mia met his glare, unshaken.
"No, Richard."
"I already have." Richard's arrogance had finally met an immovable force, Mia's calculated vengeance. And now, everything he had taken for granted was crumbling around him. The morning after their confrontation, Richard woke up to an inbox full of devastation. His employer had received an anonymous tip about his hidden financial activities. The company had a strict policy against undisclosed investments, and Richard was now under internal investigation. Panic gripped him as he frantically typed out emails, trying to contain the damage, but it was too late. The wheels were already turning. Meanwhile, Eleanor's downfall was accelerating. The fraud accusations had reached the local news, and reporters were swarming her gated mansion. Board members from the charity she chaired were distancing themselves, issuing statements of zero tolerance for unethical behavior. Overnight, she had become a pariah. And Mia? She was savoring every moment. She had moved out quietly, slipping away while Richard was at work. But she didn't leave empty-handed. Thanks to her access to his accounts, she had drained a significant portion of his secret funds, just enough to ensure her comfort while still leaving enough behind to make his financial ruin seem self-inflicted. A perfect crime hidden in plain sight. The final blow came in the form of divorce papers, delivered to Richard's office in the middle of his crisis. He barely had time to react before his phone rang. It was Claire. "You told me you had everything under control," she hissed. Now my name is being dragged into this. Do you have any idea what you've done? Richard, still reeling, tried to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. We're done. I don't need this kind of disaster in my life.
Click.
He stood in his office, stunned, as the walls closed in around him. His career, his reputation, his mistress, gone in the span of 24 hours. And Eleanor? She was too busy trying to salvage her own crumbling empire to help him. She had spent years making sure Richard relied on her, but now, when he needed her most, she had nothing left to offer. Mia had done the impossible. She had walked away, leaving behind nothing but ruin in her wake. But she wasn't done just yet. I had already orchestrated Richard and Eleanor's downfall, but there was one last piece left to play, a move that would ensure they could never recover. She had spent weeks gathering evidence, every email, every fraudulent transaction, and every lie they had spun to keep their status intact. And now, she had everything she needed to finish the job. The morning Richard's company officially terminated him, Mia made her final move. She sent an anonymous package to the federal authorities, a neatly compiled dossier detailing Eleanor's years of tax fraud and illegal property dealings. Within hours, investigators were knocking on Eleanor's door. The moment news broke of Eleanor's impending indictment, Richard panicked. With his money drained and no job to fall back on, he ran straight to his mother for help, only to find her drowning in her own legal troubles. No, this isn't happening, Eleanor murmured, pacing her once glorious mansion as officials combed through her files. This can't be happening. It is, Richard muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. We have to do something. We can fix this. But there was no fixing it. Their accounts were frozen. Their reputations were unsalvageable.
Their allies had vanished.
Richard's assets were seized, and Eleanor's properties were under investigation. The mighty Blackwoods had fallen, reduced to nothing but disgraced figures in the public eye. Mia, meanwhile, had moved on. With her share of Richard's drained funds, she built a new life, one where she was no longer living under the shadow of a toxic marriage or a controlling mother-in-law. She traveled, invested, and thrived. And she never looked back. The last time she saw Richard was on the news, a grainy photo of him outside a cheap motel, looking haggard and defeated. Eleanor's face followed soon after, captured leaving a courthouse, her signature arrogance gone, replaced with hollow desperation. Mia smiled as she switched off the TV. Justice had been served, and she had won.